responsibly lead this town, and may we do so in a way that is pleasing to you. And we just pray for all those who are engaged in some way in the Middle East right now with the tension and just what has to be a very difficult time for them and also their loved ones back here. And we just pray that this will come to a resolution soon. And we just pray for the issues that we have tonight, that we will be kind to one another, respectful of one another, and considerate. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Public comment is, as it usually is, 3 minutes per speaker. I don't have any forms of people have already filled out, but you can bring it with you when you come. If you choose to speak, give the form to our clerk, and you have 3 minutes to speak. And let me stress, this is not a back and forth time. This is your time. This is your time to speak. And if there are questions that you want answered, that can be done either later in the agenda during council comments, if a council member chooses to do so, or it can be done after the meeting, and we can hang around and try to answer people's questions if staff has not already answered those questions. So once again, 3 minutes. And first person.
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Ellie Varela. I live on Man Road, and I'm here to continue to state my opposition against Project Rita. I'd like to start by reiterating a few facts taken from the 2024 DRI. The Project Rita development is on a 161-acre site located off of Highway 74 at the Kirkley Road intersection. The development consists of 500,000 square feet of space in 2 separate buildings. We also know there will be an on-site substation, which no information on the site has been released yet. Not included in the DRI, but also facts, are the following. The site sits atop a most significant groundwater recharge area as mapped by the Georgia EPD. Trickham Creek runs through the property. Common additives to the water used for data center cooling include anti-corrosion chemicals, biocides, chlorine, and glycols. 2, the site is surrounded by residential properties. Data centers emit constant low-frequency noise that is structurally different from other sources. Noise that is tonal, continuous, and resistant to conventional sound barriers for mitigation. These low frequencies travel further and they pass through windows, so you can hear them inside. The decibel criteria does not measure those low frequencies. 3, schools and churches are in close proximity. For example, my alma mater, Flat Rock Middle School, is a whopping 1.2 miles away from the property line. 4, the data center will require more build-out of power infrastructure, affecting many citizens and their properties in the path. And so I'm asking these questions on the record and look forward to an answer. Where, when, and why was the BTP zoning changed from the original language of 200,000 square feet to allow buildings up to 300,000 square feet? If you are proud of your integrity as town leaders, this should not be hard to provide. 2, since the data center project keeps getting compared to a commercial office space, please show me the numbers. What size commercial office space? With what tenants? Because the data center runs 365, 24/7, no holidays off. Why are we treating a data center as though it is an office building that houses a few computers? It's not. They are industrial facilities and they create industrial waste. And finally, why are you still putting your faith in Microsoft? I've heard back from the town that, quote, Microsoft has committed to continuing its annual sustainability reporting, end quote. Respectfully, Microsoft's commitments are to protect Microsoft. There's more and more instances coming to light about data centers misusing resources and exceeding limits that they claimed they would stick to as good neighbors. One you can look into is the data center campus in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin. Who was this built by? Microsoft.
Next.
Council, Mayor, I've met you, and I think I've met Billy. We do a little cousins camp every year, and we brought all the kids down here one year to speak, see everything that goes on down here. And I see you at the store all the time. A second, let's see. This is about the data center. I recently spoke to a realtor about the property not far from my home. I asked if they had seen any effects from the data center moving in. They said the home was getting a lot of activity before the data center information came out and was even under contract. At this point, it no longer is. The activity on the home has dropped to a snail's pace. This is concerning for all property owners in this area and is a great concern for my family. We bought thinking this would be our forever home. Now we're considering other options. But if we decide to sell, am I going to run into the same situation of lack of interest in my property because of the data center? In my opinion, y'all have made the wrong decision for Tyrone, and it should accept the fact that a mistake has been made and stop the building of this data center. There are many concerns: water usage, water pollution. The property sits right in the middle of Trickham Creek water system. There are 3 ponds on the property. What happens to them? What are they going to do? I worked in the chemical industry for many years, and I know what a closed loop system is, and they have to be cleaned out often. During this clean out, there's a residue that's full of chemicals, metals. There's just about everything that you can possibly think of inside of these systems, and they cannot be dumped. They have no effluent plan. When I talked to Microsoft here the other night when they were all here, they have no effluent plan other than they will follow regulations, and if anything is too dangerous, that it'll be sent out. But have they provided any information on that? Not to mention sound pollution, light pollution, and possible higher power bills if this comes to fruition. I've waited my entire life to acquire a farm property in an area close to a major city in the countryside, and now it's being challenged. I don't see the benefits for Tyrone in this decision to approve a data center. It needs to be revoked. What are the benefits for Tyrone with this data center? What were the benefits? Just a question. Thank you.
Next.
Hello, my name is Molly Larson. I'm at 105 Kelsworth Way. I took a field trip today to the Microsoft Azure data center. I don't know if y'all have been there or not. It's on Williams Road in Palmetto, and it was hideous. So I just wanted to reiterate, I think it's important to do what Councilman Hunter said and put some guardrails in the BTP code. And I don't even know at this point if our Microsoft would be subject to that, but it's pretty awful. And I will send you guys the pictures I took. This isn't the greatest printout because my printer isn't fantastic, but it wasn't pretty. But the one thing I can say about it is they did put it in a good spot. It backs up to the interstate, and it's in there with like a Lowe's distribution center, which is huge, and it's in there with a Duracell battery facility that's huge. So it's a bunch of other really big buildings in a really heavy-duty office park. It's not like a wimpy office park. It is a heavy-duty place. Not really like where we're planning to put one, but I'll send you some pictures if you haven't seen it. And if it's all right, I'd like to pass some of these around so some of the other people can take a look at what it looks like.
Okay. aesthetics. Add that here.
Hello, Heather Tharp from 200 Montego Trail. I'll start off by saying I oppose the data center, but what I want to speak about is something a little bit more than the data center today. So I attended the July 2nd council meeting and was particularly interested in the exchange during the public comment between one of our citizens and the mayor regarding questions posed by the council, and this surrounded the NDAs. So first, I don't believe that a citizen asking questions from the lecturant should result in a perceived threat of physical removal by law enforcement during public comment. The image that was presented to the citizens of Tyrone was disturbing and should not be tolerated by our elected officials. Asking questions of elected representatives is not criminal behavior. It is expected, encouraged, and fundamentally healthy to a democracy. Unfortunately, the perception left by that exchange in that question is that questions are not welcome. It suggests that a true question and answer dialogue is not desired during council meetings because it would not become part of the public record. Whether intended or not, the message conveyed to residents is that transparency is being avoided and that our current and former city officials may have information they don't want to openly discuss. Regarding the question about non-disclosure agreements, I observed an additional exchange after the meeting between our mayor and that same citizen. The citizen again asked whether the mayor or any member of council had signed an NDA related to the data center. The response was not what I would have expected. Rather than stating, "I can't discuss that matter because it's an NDA," the mayor responded that it is not illegal or immoral to sign one. Mayor, I respectfully disagree. As a mayor of Tyrone, your primary obligation is to represent the citizens who elected you, not the corporations, developers, or executives who seek approval for projects that will permanently impact our community and surrounding communities. While signing an NDA may not be illegal, I believe it raises serious ethical concerns when executed by elected officials regarding matters that directly affect the public. Transparency about the default position of public service. What was even more concerning was the mayor's subsequent statement that he did not really remember the details because it occurred apparently 2.5 years ago. That response raises an additional significant question. If our mayor cannot recall the circumstances surrounding an NDA related to a project of this magnitude, a project that involved annexation, rezoning, ordinance amendments, and significant changes to what can be built within our town, how many such agreements are being signed by elected officials, the elected officials of Tyrone, for their particular terms? Finally, the actions of this council and prior councils over the past several years have resulted in a growing lack of public trust. Many residents no
you.
longer believe in your decisions.
Thank you, ma'am. Next.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Clarl. I live on Man Road. I'm reiterating my request for you to create a strict ordinance for data centers. You met with the FCDA in 2023. If you created the BTP zoning in order to have a category for data centers, why wasn't a specific ordinance covering them created at that time? The Atlanta Regional Commission reviewed the DRI on Project Rita and submitted its findings to the town on March 13, 2024. It found this, quote, "The project is not aligned with developing suburbs policy recommendations which state, quote, there is a need in these areas for additional preservation of critical environmental locations and resources, as well as agricultural and forest uses," end quote. Did this matter to you? By now, you know that this is an environmentally sensitive property containing wetlands and Trickham Creek. Tyrone needs an ordinance that addresses watershed protection, erosion, and sedimentation. How can we be assured that the pipes that contain the chemical-laden water used for cooling can withstand blasting vibrations from the nearby quarry and will not leak? Governor Brian Kemp was interviewed by Bloomberg Radio on June 3rd when he attended the Edison Electrical Institute's annual meeting. Although he has welcomed the proliferation of data centers in Georgia, he said this, quote, "We certainly don't need to be pushing them in communities where the local governments and the people don't want it," end quote. Well, we the people had no say in whether we wanted this. Since you overrode any input we would have had at the time prior to approval, it is now your responsibility to create a comprehensive ordinance before this project proceeds. A temporary moratorium would allow you to research this and write an ordinance specific for data centers. Some communities have taken months to craft such an ordinance. You cannot rush this now because you did nothing for 2.5 years. In May, Rockdale County extended their moratorium on data centers to allow more time for public input and ordinance revisions because they discovered their ordinance governing data centers was wholly inadequate. They note that by right, as applied to zoning, does not mean unregulated. You can regulate this. Rockdale's proposal specifies a minimum setback of 1,000 feet from private wells, childcare facilities, schools, and places of assembly. Project Rita will be less than 1,000 feet from a daycare center, from homes in Rivercrest, and from homes on wells on Thompson and Kirkley Roads. The Rockdale proposal includes a list of studies that will be required by developers and outlines a precise procedure that will guide the permitting process. I hope you will create an equally stringent procedure. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Shawnee Dudley. I live on Hedrick Way, Tyrone. So Mayor, council members, and fellow residents, tonight I'm asking for something that should never be controversial, and you've heard it already, transparency. This discussion is no longer just about all the things we've talked about the data center. There's another layer, and it's about public trust. The public record shows that Project Rita was already moving through the development process months before the town council voted to annex and rezone this property in 2024. Rezoning applications had been filed, regional planning documents described as a large-scale data center. The Fayette County Development Authority was actively involved in assembling the land. Yet many residents have said they did not fully understand the scope, scale, or intended use of this project until the public hearings were already underway. This disconnect matters. Residents spoke during those meetings expressing concerns about a data center. Questions were asked about what was being planned and what was known. Looking back today, it is fair to ask whether the public had access to the same information that government officials, staff, and project representatives had at that time. If the answer is yes, then show us. If no, then tell us why. Because transparency should never depend on what citizens are able to uncover after the fact. We also need to follow the money. Public reports indicate that Fayette County Development Authority assembled these properties before they were ultimately transferred to Microsoft. Residents deserve a complete accounting. How much was paid to acquire the land? How much was received when it was sold? What were the costs associated with the transaction? What was the net financial benefit? Where are those funds today? And how are they being used? And what tangible benefit will the residents of Tyrone receive in exchange for the permanent transformation of this community? These are not accusations. These are questions for public accountability. I'm also asking for complete transparency regarding the role of every public entity involved in this process. When did Fayette County Development Authority begin pursuing this project? And when did town council leadership first learn that this site was being considered for a data center? What communications occurred between the Development Authority, town officials, developers, and prospective end users before those public hearings? The best way to answer these questions is not with assurances, but with documents. So I ask you to release the records that allow the public to understand how this decision was made. If the process was conducted appropriately, transparency will strengthen public confidence. If mistakes were made, then acknowledge them, learn from them, and ensure that this never happens again. Government works best when it welcomes scrutiny rather than fears it.
Thank
Tonight,
you.
I ask
Thank you,
this
ma'am.
council to choose openness over secrecy, accountability over uncertainty,
Thank you,
and choose
ma'am.
the people of Tyrone over your interests. Our
Next.
community deserves answers. Thank you.
Next. Hello.
Greetings. I'm
Greetings.
Dr. Anna Justbetty. I own Trilogy Health and Wellness on 510 Swanson Road. We have been servicing our community for 19 years approximately. We focus on healthcare issues. Even though we're an integrated medical clinic, we try to focus on more natural approaches to healthcare. And about 3.5 years ago, I also became a resident. I used to live in South Fayetteville, and I actually moved to Tyrone. I bought approximately 4 acres of land and actually had the privilege of building a downsizing home. However, if I had known about the data center, I live on Man Road, 330 Man Road. If I'd known about the data center 3.5 years ago, I don't think I would have purchased that land and moved to this town, even though I service this town in terms of their healthcare needs. My concern is when I started to really research the healthcare implications of the data centers and a lot of the ongoing research that's actually being, let out or exposed, et cetera, I really started to have a lot of concerns. Like one of them is the electromagnetic radiation or pollution. Data centers emit about anywhere from 1/2 mile of electromagnetic radiation. Well, why is that a big deal? Every single cell in our body, we have about 37 to 100 trillion cells in our body, not a billion, a trillion. Every single cell in our body is polarized. We're electromagnetic. Our central nervous system is electromagnetic. Our planet is based on electromagnetics. It has a north and south pole. So what does this mean? It means it's disruption. So we all know that if we were purchasing a house, do you want to purchase a house by major power stations and having major power lines? It's a clinical fact that it causes various diseases, such as cancers, all sorts of, autoimmune disorders. We all know that. Upon growing up, I am 60 years old. How many people in our family or friends that we grew up with back in the day over 50 years ago that had cancer or MS? It's at crazy rates now. Now, there's many factors to this, but we know for a fact electromagnetic pollutions is one of them. The other thing with our 37 trillion cells, our central nervous system and our memory is impacted by electromagnetics.
Thank you, ma'am.
So if we actually have, memory losses such as Alzheimer's and everything else,
We'll have another
and
public
it's
comment.
increasing on that.
We'll have
Yes.
another public comment period at the end if you'd like to finish.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you, ma'am.
you.
Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Brandon, next item.
Thank you, sir. Next item is consideration to rescind Section 8-2 of the Town's Code of Ordinances regarding polling place. While researching the Town's Code of Ordinances for another item, staff identified outdated language in Section 8-2 regarding the location of polling places for municipal elections. Basically, it still designates our polling place as Tyrone First Baptist Church and states that early voting may occur at the library the week preceding the election. Well, a lot's changed since that ordinance was written. We've been doing early voting the last couple of cycles here. Prior to that, it was at the old police department, and soon, hopefully, it'll be over at the old town hall once the community room there is finished. We've been holding election day elections at the library for several years now. But again, once the renovations at the old town hall are finished and the community room is done, all voting will take place there. So we consulted with the town attorney regarding the appropriate approach to update this, and council advised that there's no practical need for the town's code to specify polling locations. Instead, the ordinance should either be removed entirely or be amended to provide the general language stating that polling places will be located at sites designated by the council. So staff recommends repealing section 8-2 of the Code of Ordinances. I believe there is a hard copy of the ordinance that legal has prepared to rescind this ordinance in front of you.
How much does the Fayette County or the election board have with regards to polling places?
I mean, ultimately, we can suggest locations if they want to host voting here in town, which you know, we have the rare polling place. You know, the process has been, you know, we think it'll work over at the library. So they come and look at the library and they say, yes, we can make this work. So basically, when we moved it over here from the old police department building because of conditions over there, they came and inspected. They said, yes, this will work. And I assume they go back and their board votes. I'm not entirely sure how that works. I work directly with Brianna. But yes, they come over, they inspect the site, they make sure. When we started the renovations at 881, we brought them over there and asked them about layouts, you know, needs for, you know, where to put the plugs, how many plugs, all those specifications. So they had a lot of input in that. And they have, you know, all the input as far as, you know, going back and actually making the decision on where to hold voting. So we've taken them to 881 a couple of times, and they believe that once that building is built out, that it'll serve well for the 3 weeks of early voting and election day voting going forward.
I'm not fond of how we do it here because it's so open. You're standing there just like this, and everybody
Yeah.
can see exactly who's voting for what and for when.
It's very
There-
temporary,
you know,
but it's not
I
ideal for
realize
sure,
that,
yeah.
and I know you're working hard to change that. But
Yeah.
I have a question about that last sentence, where it says sites designated by the town council. Does that mean that we have to vote to approve the site selection, or is that something that staff should be
Not
working with?
necessarily. I think what I meant by that is if we were to make a change in some way that was substantial and we had to put money into that change or something, you guys would have to vote on that. And I'll give you an example of that. When we moved early voting or voting in general to the police department building, there were power upgrade needs that had to happen over there. And I believe council had to vote on that because of the cost.
Okay.
So things like that is what I meant by that.
Anyone else? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to rescind section 8.2 of the town's code of ordinances regarding polling place.
Second.
In discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public comment. We'll start with the gentle lady who did not get to finish hers. Would you like to finish, or are you satisfied? Ma'am? Yes, would you like to finish now, or are you okay with? Okay. Next, anyone else?
Eric Larson, 105 Kelsworth Way. I think something we need to consider here, like concurrently, is we need to not need Microsoft, right? There was a study that the Fayette County Development Authority did that I questioned the data somewhat, but talked about how the residential digest costs Tyrone $1.15 for every dollar that comes in, right? So that fraction is inverted, right? So the idea here is you need to increase that commercial tax rate, right? And I know the data center's a way to do it. I think there's some argument whether that'll actually happen or not, but that's for another day. I get a little concerned that we know that, yet we're still adding 106 family homes over here by Publix, right? But I'm not gonna argue that point either. My point is when you look through Tyrone, there's a lot of businesses leaving. Shaycraft left, Ohio Barbecue left. There's a barber shop over there by Publix, shut down. Wings and Things shut down. Nico shut down. Sonic is a disaster. I mean, that shut a long time ago, right? Plus, I think there's some other places over there that are shut down, right? So I would argue we're moving in the wrong direction, right? I mean, we should make Tyrone a place where businesses want to come. And I get a little concerned that when you drive through here, there's an abandoned building over here by where that, I don't know, where that storage location is. There's the yellow abandoned house down here, right? I mean, it kind of looks like the lot of Adams family, right? I mean, there's just a lot of stuff here that nobody's living in, right? If we, and I think some of these places are going to Sonoya, and if I owned a business here, I'd go to Sonoya. I mean, objectively, right? They have a nice place to walk. You can get, and we are moving in the right direction. We're having these Tyrone nights and things. I think that's certainly moving in the right direction, right? I will fully admit that. I wonder if we can do two things at once, right? I know that we could take a look at kind of like how we're going to structure this, what goes in the data center, what color paint, well, whatever, right? I mean, that can be argued, and I'm not arguing that. The other side of that coin is we need to make this a place where if this data center doesn't work out, which I hope it doesn't, right? That we got other stuff coming in to make up this residential inverse fraction, right? And I'm not telling you how to suck an egg here, right? But I think we could do, there's some low-hanging fruit there where we could make it so people would be more apt. Shea Cafe would say, well, I'm gonna stay here because I don't have a parking lot next to me where there was once a fire station, right? So I would ask you to take a look at that, right? To make Tyrone just small. It's, as my mom would say, I think sometimes it just needs a good bath, okay? But thank you.
Thank you. Next. All right, staff comments?
Philip and I each have a couple of things. Do you want to go? Go ahead. I'll refer to you for first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Per some request of council and answering some questions from the last meeting regarding the BTP ordinance, staff's kind of prepared a little bit of an overview. The first item is addressing square footage in the BTP ordinance. So just a point of clarification, the Business Technology Park ordinance, BTP ordinance, has never been amended after its adoption. Questions regarding the square footage I know have come up. The ordinance did have multiple workshop meetings. At each of these workshop meetings and different levels of discussion, multiple square footages were identified over the course of each time this ordinance kind of came up for discussion. Going through the time frame, I tried to make sure that I went back and looked at the most official times that council considered the BTP ordinance, that we had discussions on that. The first time that we had discussions on this was October of 2020, October 1st of 2020. This was a workshop meeting. I think it was our annual workshop meeting. And at that point, the Development Authority, Fayette County Development Authority, was trying to help us attract more economic development in the town of Tyrone. At that point, we had not gotten a lot of investment from the Development Authority. There was, at that point, a square footage was mentioned, was 100,000 square feet, was kind of a size limitation that was tossed around. After kind of looking at different industries and looking at the direction that the town wanted to go for being able to attract development, 100,000 square feet was identified as too small to kind of attract competitive development. Moving into March 10th of 2022, this was another workshop where we had some discussion on the BTP. In December 15th, on December 15th of 2022, there was another discussion about the square footage, or I'm sorry, not discussion, there was a meeting scheduled for consideration. At that time, the square footage was 200,000 square feet, so over the course of 2020 to 2022 and talking to the Development Authority, there was a 200,000 square foot number discussed, but the ordinance was not adopted at that time. And then going into February of 2023, we did have an adoption of 300,000 square feet. So that had changed from the discussions in workshops, but not post-adoption.
So the reason that we had a lot of discussions about square footage is because there's not really an identifiable square footage cap amongst other municipalities in Fayette County on industrial square footage. So in Peachtree City and in Fayetteville, as an example, there is no cap for the square footage of a facility. There are other ways that they have, regulations that approach this, but not a hard cap. So the discussions about increasing square footage and the right square footage for development, especially industrial development, was really around economic development, marketability for the town, being able to make sure that we were able to attract business. At that time, the 200,000 square foot number was being discussed. There was a lot of concentrated discussion about an advanced fabrication and assembly facility that could come to town. But overall, these discussions were looking at not establishing, number one, not establishing precedent beyond what had already existed in Fayette County. So as an example, the Sani building in Peachtree City is one of the largest industrial buildings, save some QTS buildings. That facility is over 300,000 square feet. So we did not want to establish precedent of structures that were larger than anything else that was kind of seen in the county. And so 300,000 was set as a cap at that point. That 200,000 number was, or that 300,000 number was really incentivized, though, from discussions about an advanced manufacturing and assembly facility that has actually ended up going to Peachtree City. That's where this conversation kind of evolved, how it evolved. I think at that time there was a lot of discussion about not having a cap on square footage, but again, we did not want to establish a precedent for buildings larger than what was already seen at that time in Fayette County. So that's a little bit of the background on some of the square footage. Did council have any questions regarding that timeline, or any of the motivations or anything like that?
This was all included in what was sent to us today, right?
Yeah, I had sent a council memo on,
Right.
or an email
Right.
outlining this with links to council minutes and things like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's what was going on. So that square footage has not been amended after adoption. The 300 was the language that was presented for adoption. That's what was adopted, and it has not been changed since.
So when you say workshops, could you express what a workshop looks like?
Yeah, a workshop is exactly what it sounds like. It is not an official decision of council on an ordinance. It is a time to workshop out discussions on ordinance provisions. So this is where we are still in the development phase of ordinances. You discuss them, you give us input. Different things like that is how a workshop meeting occurs.
And workshops are open to the public?
Yes, there's still public meetings. We still have each one of those meetings has packets on the website. So everything that was presented to you is available to the public for every single one of those meetings.
Okay. And then this is probably to address one of the questions that I heard earlier. When do we get those packets as a council in relation to the public?
So you get them at the same time as the general public. So so the packet and the agenda is published on the website. Dee sends that out, and that is made available at the same time. Usually a week in advance of the meetings.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kind of further on that point, it was directed to staff to begin doing some research as a comparative analysis of data center ordinances in Georgia, which have started to arise as specific and unique ordinances over the past couple of years. Based on research of recent ordinances adopted through Georgia, and we're still performing some of this research, comparatively, our set of ordinances are very strict compared to other ordinances. The BTP ordinance is established as a more restrictive industrial zoning ordinance or zoning classification. So although it is not a specific data center ordinance, it is a restrictive industrial ordinance. That's how it was designed. And it was designed in order to work in tandem with our other ordinances. We have environmental ordinances, stormwater ordinances, we have noise ordinances, we have all kinds of other zoning ordinances, land development ordinances, overlay ordinances, things like that. And particularly on the aesthetic front, on the physical form of the buildings, We have particularly high standards that are different from other types of municipalities, especially municipalities that surround us. In fact, just as it pertains to Microsoft, they will have to build in Tyrone a very different looking facility than they've built pretty much anywhere else, as far as I can see from what they've built elsewhere in Georgia. That being the case, the ordinance is kind of holding up as it's designed to do, which is to work in tandem with those other ordinances, again, to be a strict ordinance for all industrial users within that category to adhere to. So again, I'm pulling specific data center ordinances, and in a lot of those different categories that data center ordinances cover, our ordinances, again, as a whole, do address most of those concerns. I'm still going through that, but comparatively speaking, our ordinance is very strict. And so we'll keep doing that research, and I can bring more to you as we go through.
Can you just give us an example? You talk about that the BTB is more restrictive. Can you give us an example on the environmental end of it? What differentiates the BTB as BTP, thank you, as opposed to another industrial site?
So the town's environmental management ordinances, stormwater protection, tree protection ordinances apply to all commercial developments, and we keep them very, very high. I think across the board, we keep them high. The BTP, in terms of environmental, it's the only thing that it has that's above and beyond perhaps where our environmental ordinances exist is in the setback and buffering requirements associated with any and all BTP uses. So that's perhaps where it increases, but really the heaviest restrictions exist in our stormwater and tree protection ordinances. Every development that comes to town has to do a specimen tree survey. They have to do sampling. They have to identify tree density units. They have to show how what they're doing with their stormwater. They have to do treatment of their stormwater with bioretention areas. They have to show how they manage that, where they're capturing it, everything like that. So that's where the bulk of our ordinance covers environmental items.
Thank you.
Along with Billy's comment, we've heard people talk about the 1,000-foot setback. Could you tell the rationale, I guess, for why our setbacks are different and in relation to what other places are?
So our ordinance works in tandem with our land use plan. So BTP, so you have regulations essentially around development, and development occurs in your community in two different ways. Number one is very specifically in the area of zoning. And so zoning will stipulate what the buffers are against certain types of uses, against certain types of properties, and it'll identify setbacks, buffers, things like that. The other aspect of it is how our land use plan operates. And so our land use plan designates where certain zoning classifications can even exist in the first place. So if we have identified that certain zoning classifications, such as BTP, can only locate in certain areas that are ostensibly, a particular distance away from residential, that's another way to regulate distancing. And so our ordinance for BTP in particular operates that way. So we have minimum acreage requirements, we have different properties that are able to qualify for BTP, other ones that are not, and the BTP ordinance is only permitted in certain future land use character areas. And those character areas are positioned away from existing Tyrone residential neighborhoods as at a particular distance away from them. So does that get a little bit at your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, I know that site has a lot of restrictions because of the wetlands in the back, so I'm assuming that they can't go but so far back because obviously they would be encroaching in that area. But I'm just wondering, like, I've seen it several times where people, other ordinances suggest 1,000 feet from that, but they also have some really big data centers in comparison to ours, and I'm just wondering, like, is there some type of formula or some type of thought process in the distance in the building size?
Yes, certainly. So the larger you allow a building, the more that you want to distance that building from either the roadway to reduce its perceived size, the more that you want to distance it from obviously residential, so that you are you're mitigating any kind of impacts. Again, also mitigating the visual impact of the building. So a 1,000,000 square foot building obviously looks very in the same position from the roadway or from a particular property, looks much more impactful than a smaller building. Tyrone had established a 300,000 square foot cap for that purpose, that we did not want and we did not think it was appropriate for any buildings, again, larger than any that already existed in Fayette County to be situated on any property that could be zoned for BTP purposes. So, and that goes, of course, for data centers, but any other advanced or high-intensity industrial use that would otherwise be allowed in BTP. And so our setbacks and our buffers and our placement and things are also relative to the size, including our height limitations, because we have height limitations. Again, there are a lot of communities that don't have a height restriction on their buildings. Most that I've seen for data centers range anywhere between 60 to 80 feet. Ours is capped at 35, up to 50. If you go above 35, you have to increase your setback and buffers and berms and things to get up to 50, but then you can't go beyond 50 or 55. I'd have to confirm that. But yes, we have all kinds of things that go into, again, the scale of the building, the size of the building, and all of those restrictions and development standards are based around size as well.
With your knowledge of the facade that we require in that overlay, how would you compare it to the one in Palmetto? Or any other ones?
Well,
any other ones in the nearby area?
We require the facade of those buildings to be 30% Class A material, which is brick, stone, glass, brick, stone, glass, or veneer of like glazing, which is basically glass. I'm not aware that those facilities meet that requirement. And for a lot of facilities, they have a lot of their different types of equipment that situate around the exterior of the building. That's something that Microsoft's going to have to address with us, because if that equipment is situated around the facade of the building, then that has to become essentially the new facade as it's part of the architecture of the building. And so there will have to be some specific items that they address with us that I have not seen them address with other Microsoft data centers in particular in the area. They're usually tilt-up concrete EFIS panels is mostly what those
And that
buildings
just
are.
simply cannot happen here.
Well, it can have, 30%, you can have tilt-up concrete or EFIS, but 30% of it has to be Class A material, and we also don't allow long, flat walls more than 20 feet, so they're gonna have to come up with architectural accenting, in addition to buffering from the road.
Okay. Let's see, does anybody else have a question for Philip before we?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Microsoft still has not presented any kind of plans or anything at this point, to my knowledge anyway, am I correct?
They've presented what they were required to present during zoning, which is again another heavy requirement, restriction that we have, which is their conceptual development plan. And so their conceptual development plan was actually presented before the zoning, because it was presented as part of the DRI process. That DRI process identified the approximate siting of the buildings, their size, the location of other things such as their transfer station, their substation, different items like that. And so ultimately that site plan becomes part and parcel of the zoning.
Hold on just a second.
I dropped them.
So that development plan becomes part and parcel of the zoning, and it essentially serves as a conceptual plan that they must adhere to. That's another element of our ordinance that many other ordinances don't have, which is if we don't like the placement of something during a conceptual process, during the zoning, we can request that that be altered or changed at the time of their zoning application. So, and one of those was the positioning of the substation behind the buildings, because we didn't want the substation in front of the buildings facing Highway 74. So there are some customized conditions that
can be placed at the time of zoning. That's what they have currently, and that's what they have at a minimum to abide by as they go forward. But it's not that we don't have anything, we have that, but we don't have full civil engineering plans or things like that. There's different stages of the development process where all of those items come into play, and where at different permit stages, different items are triggered as to be required by the town and for them to submit to us.
Thank you.
And a lot of those are pending.
Counselor, when was it that the county either adopted that area for BTP? Do you recall? I want to say it was 2004. Does that sound right?
It was at a time when Pete Frasina was here, and it would have been at a time, it would have been before 2007, so late 90s, early 2000s would be about the time frame.
It was shortly thereafter that we were requested to follow suit since our properties were adjacent. So we were talking about BTP with the county so as to be consistent. My guess is somewhere around 2011, maybe 10. So it was going into our long-term plan at that time. But we didn't create a BTP for data centers.
That is correct. From our comprehensive planning discussions over the past many years, it was in an effort to have a land use plan that was similar to Fayette County. Fayette County had BTP established. They have business park zoning, BP, which is like a light industrial zoning. And BTP was actually a land use category in their plan. And so that area was slated for that type of development within the unincorporated county going back, 90s, early 2000s. So the town's discussions during our comprehensive planning stage were, do we let these areas develop in the unincorporated county outside of the town's limits? And, or do we basically try and envelop these properties into our land use plan and have our level of control over that development as the town grows and be able to potentially reap some of the benefits that would come from that development style. But that was and has been the long-range plan, both for the county and the town, going back many decades.
Any other questions for Philip? I do want to address one comment that was directed to me. While I don't disagree that the chief's comments last meeting were perfect or the way we would have them done, he and I had a good conversation afterward. But in his defense, he did not threaten to drag anybody out of here. He said, why don't you ask questions after or just speak. He did not make a threat to drag anybody out. That would have crossed the line. And in my book, I want to make sure I defend him on that accusation. And he and I had a productive conversation after the meeting because I don't disagree that the optics were not ideal. I, for one, and I'm confident that all five of us, always happy to answer questions. It is just a hard and fast rule that we don't do so during public comment. I try to announce that every meeting, and it's just not the time. So I'll stay after today and answer as many questions as I can. And hopefully the others will too, as will staff, if they can. Okay. Brandon, I think you had another staff comment.
Yes, sir. So a couple of meetings ago, you guys were presented with this Georgia groundwater recharge area map. And it was brought to your attention that the area targeted for the data center is in a groundwater recharge area, which This map's hard to see, so I wanted to bring up the full-size map. As you'll see by this brown area, most of northwest Fayette County is a groundwater recharge area. So everyone's home in Tyrone, all the businesses in Tyrone, this building, the rock quarry up north, most of the industrial park to the south, all of downtown are in a groundwater recharge area. So Ms. Whalen, after that last meeting, asked for staff to kind of summarize what that means. What does it mean that there's a groundwater recharge area, and how does that affect development? Well, because Tyrone, most of Tyrone is a groundwater recharge area, obviously it doesn't stop development or prevent development. Now, there's a lot of regulation when it comes to groundwater recharge areas, but it does not prevent development. So Mr. Cantor, our environmental specialist, put together a memo. I sent that to you all yesterday. I don't want to read the entire memo here. We will put it on the website, but I do want to hit some of the highlights, and I will read some of it verbatim. So as it pertains to groundwater recharge area protection requirements for data center development, data centers are subject to state environmental regulations and local groundwater protection ordinances intended to protect groundwater resources, particularly where development occurs within a designated significant groundwater recharge area. The town of Tyrone has adopted a groundwater recharge area protection ordinance to safeguard public drinking water supplies and aquifer recharge areas identified by the Georgia DNR. That ordinance establishes groundwater recharge protection standards that apply to development within mapped recharge areas and requires compliance before the town may approve building permits, rezoning requests, or subdivision plats. For data center developments, compliance obligations may include designing fuel and chemical storage with appropriate secondary containment, providing impermeable surfaces for hazardous material handling, avoiding prohibited stormwater infiltration practices in highly susceptible recharge areas, and implementing measures to prevent groundwater contamination from operational activities. Emergency generator fuel systems, cooling water treatment chemicals, transfer oils, and battery storage systems should all be evaluated for consistency with the town's groundwater protection standards. In addition to local requirements, projects must comply with applicable Georgia EPD regulations. Georgia does not require a standalone groundwater recharge permit for industrial projects, but industrial groundwater withdrawal permit must be obtained if the facility withdraws over 100,000 gallons per day. That's from an aquifer. Microsoft has not indicated that they're going to tap into the aquifer. They're using Fayette County water. The project must also comply with other EPD regulations governing erosion and sediment control, construction stormwater permitting, water withdrawals if groundwater is proposed as a water supply, wastewater management, and other environmental permitting requirements. Depending on site conditions, additional state or federal permits may be required. Data center projects remain subject to applicable local, state, and federal environmental review and permitting processes before construction may commence, including review of site plans, land disturbance permits, and other development approvals. So we've got a lot of questions about siting of this development, and we haven't gotten there yet. So they have not yet submitted any engineering. They have not submitted any requests for permits, and so the technical review process hasn't even begun. And so a lot of these questions that we're receiving about, some of these aspects we can't answer, and that's normal. The zoning happened 2 years ago. All that answered was, can this piece of land be used for this purpose? That's what zoning answers. The next step, when the developer is ready, is to submit their engineering and their designs for technical review and the permitting process. So we're not there yet. And so unfortunately, we don't have a lot of the answers that folks are looking for, but again, that's normal. Sometimes developers wait after zoning. Y'all know that. Y'all have seen that. Some move faster, but that's where we are with this one.
Brandon, do we have any indication as to when Microsoft will be submitting those? Have they given us any?
Not exact dates. I know they're working with Philip. They are going back and forth, just kind of talking about the engineering aspect and the design. But have they indicated any time frame?
They've not indicated a time frame. Just some basic logistical questions about the location of gravity lines for sewer, some coordination about understanding right-of-way permitting with the county on Kirkley Road, different things like that.
And when they do submit that, that's brought to a public forum? Or is that?
Well, it's brought to a public meeting. So the development plan review process, the civil engineering review process, particularly for a site of this size, is something that'll take a few months. It goes through a review with what we call our technical review committee. The technical review committee is usually made up of the Fayette County Fire Marshal. It is the Town of Tyrone Engineering is our town engineer, environmental management, which is our environmental specialist, planning and development, which is myself, environmental health, if they are on septic, that's Fayette County Environmental Health, they are not, and the Fayette County Water System. We will then also add, depending on the development, the Fayette County Road Department, Fayette County School System, and the Town of Tyrone Police Department, depending on the development type, to the Technical Review Committee. We get a series of plan sets that outline all of their civil engineering items, including all the items that Brandon talked about that affect groundwater recharge. And we go through multi-month review, essentially, of all of those items. And Scott, Jake, and I work together on that. We individually look at it, we together work at it, and we send comments back, and there's usually multiple rounds of comments and revisions that goes back and forth with the developer. So this is the development plan, or this is really the site plan approval process and what it looks like for the town. I'll just give a shout out to Jake for putting a lot of this information together. The town is actually very lucky. We are what we call a local issuing authority. We have the ability to regulate certain state level environmental ordinances and to adopt our own more stringent environmental ordinances for us to review locally. Not every town, in fact, very rarely does a town our size take environmental management seriously, to have an MS4 program and to be a local issuing authority at our size. It's usually reserved for larger cities. So Jake does an excellent job for us in giving an extra round of reviews. And we get a lot of better results from development as a result of that, especially in the area of stormwater management practices, bioretention areas. East Group had to build multiple acres worth of bioretention area in their facility to capture runoff, pre-treat it before it goes into their detention system and then makes its way along. So that's what we expect for all of our developments, and we've done that for developments large and small. But that's the process, and that's where we engage with it.
Ms. Wheeler, when I shook my head when you asked if this went to a public forum, I thought you meant a public hearing.
Oh, no,
The planning commission approval is it's a public meeting, but it's not a public hearing.
Right.
So,
Got it.
And yes, the planning commission does review site plans. They will get a look at a final site plan. If there's any plating to be done, they'll look at that as well. There's no plating to be done at this stage. but
Those meetings are posted when they're being held, correct?
They're posted. The packets for those items go out to the public at the same time as planning commission. They go out normally in a week or so in advance. And they're not public hearings, but they are public meetings for the public to observe.
Right. Thank you.
And then finally, under Jake's, somewhat Jake put together, he provided this two-pager here. It's a summary of the MPDES Infrastructure Construction General Permit requirements. It's a 50-page document. He kind of summarized it into just a couple pages, but it is a list of requirements and things of that nature. And just one of the things that Philip kind of hit on it, but it's important for compliance. Is the inspection and maintenance requirements. The town and the general contractor have obligations in that area. So daily, certified personnel, this is once the construction begins, certified personnel must inspect project sites for petroleum spills and off-site tracking. Weekly, the town environmental specialist, and then bi-weekly, the general contractor will inspect erosion and stormwater controls to ensure proper installation and function throughout the duration of the project. Violations may be issued if compliance not met, and then post-rainfall. Inspection of all disturbed areas and control measures are required within 24 hours of a rain event of half an inch or more. Deficiencies must be repaired within 2 days unless significant repairs are needed, which allows for 7 days after a significant event. So I think it's a good resource that he prepared. He did a great job with it. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. If I can't answer it, I'll get Jake to to follow up. But like I said, this was sent to y'all. We will put it on the website for public review as well. But he just sent this out to us yesterday. So,
Thank you.
and then if I may, just aside from that, I just wanted to comment, Ms. Whalen wanted to also make sure that, because she's absent, that we just recognize the America 250. The event overall was a success, had a lot of people there July 4th, and I appreciate I just want to recognize the committee, Mr. Hunter, Ms. Whalen, Major Nelson, Christie. You know, it was a great event overall. We've had a lot of positive feedback on it. We are going to do a survey, a public survey, but just to get some feedback. But I just, on behalf of Ms. Whalen, I just wanted to make sure that we recognized and that event and the committee for their hard work on putting it together. And I apologize if I missed anybody on the committee. I don't think I did.
Agreed. Thank you. Everyone on the committee. Thank you, Christie, for your work. Council comments?
I have a question. A couple meetings ago, I think we talked about or heard about an on-call system for Public Works. Where are we with that?
The ordinances, the policies drafted.
Yeah, we have the policy drafted. We're just going, Brandon and I, along with Sandy, are just going through final refinement before putting it on an agenda, but we're very close to that.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other council comments?
I have a comment, and it's actually a shout out. I want to shout out Christy. I'm going to embarrass you right now in front of all of our citizens. We've been blessed in Tyrone to have consistent leadership in the Parks and Rec department. The latest was Linda Owens. She did a fantastic job for us. Her assistant at the time was Christy, who has stepped into that role because Linda retired. And what many people don't realize or recognize is that while we've had all of these wonderful events like America 250, Spring Market, et cetera, Christy has been running that department alone. And if you saw on your agenda, we just approved an assistant for her, so congratulations. You're finally getting some help. But it takes a lot to put on these events for the community, and I will encourage anyone in this room to step up and try to do a little bit of volunteering. She could use the assistance. Shout out to the many churches that have helped and the many volunteers that have helped for those meetings. And shout out.
Other council comments? Okay. There is a need for executive session, one matter or two?
Two matters. One is the threatened litigation. One is the review of your executive session minutes from July 2nd, 2026.
Okay, we will be back as soon as possible. Is there a motion to move to executive session for the two matters mentioned?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.